Hello, creepers. Before we dive in, hit like, subscribe, and drop in the comments. Where in history should the zombie outbreak hit next? Now let's get to it. The sun had not yet broken through the mist when I began my patrol. The air in Ta'al was heavy with the scent of wet earth and burning kerosene lamps. Roosters crowed somewhere beyond the plaza, but their cries sounded tired, as if the town itself had not slept. Our barrack stood beside the stone church. From its belfry, the friar's bell marked the start of every day, every sermon, every punishment. For years, I had grown used to its rhythm. It told us when to kneel, when to march, and when to stay silent. But lately, each toll seemed to linger longer than before, like an echo that refused to die. I walked past the church courtyard, rifle slung over my shoulder. The cobbled street was quiet, except for the shuffle of barefoot townsfolk heading to market. They avoided my eyes. To them, I was not one of their own anymore. I wore the uniform of the Guardia Civil, the Spanish crown's eyes and hands. A woman selling rice cakes crossed herself as I passed. I could almost hear her whisper, "Traitor." I pretended not to notice. I had learned to keep my head down. A soldier who listens to every insult does not live long. When I reached the northern post, my commander, Lieutenant Morales, was already waiting. A tall Spanish man with pale skin and colder eyes. He looked at me as though he could see through my bones. "You've heard the rumors?" he said, lighting a cigar. "They say a fever spreads in the northern barrios. The Indios panic easily. Tell them to stay in their homes. If anyone resists, remind them who keeps order here." I nodded. It was always the same. There was no illness that the whip could not cure, at least in the eyes of men like him. By midday, the marketplace filled with sound, vendors calling out, children running barefoot, friars moving among the people, blessing and scolding in equal measure. Everything looked normal, but the air carried a strange stillness, a kind of waiting. An old fisherman came stumbling into town from the lake, his face pale, his voice shaking. He shouted that his wife had fallen ill, that she attacked him when he tried to carry her home. The Spanish clerk at the municipal hall, or Casa Real, laughed it off, saying the man was drunk. The friar ordered him to confess his sins before he spoke another word. No one believed him, but I saw the terror in his eyes. Later that evening, the sky turned the color of ash. I stood guard outside the church as the friars led the rosary. The teniente sat near the altar, half asleep, his sword resting beside him. Through the open doors, I could see the townsfolk praying, their faces dimly lit by candlelight. Every eye was fixed on the crucifix above the altar, as though it alone could keep them safe. A boy approached me outside, his hands trembling. He said the dogs were howling in the fields, and that one of them had bitten its owner before running into the woods. I wanted to tell him to go home, but something in his voice made me stop. I promised I would send a patrol in the morning. He nodded and ran off, vanishing into the fog. When night came, I sat on the church steps, rifle across my knees. The town was silent except for the chirping of crickets and the occasional cry of an infant. I stared at the bell tower. For a moment, I thought I saw it sway. Then came a faint sound, a single, sharp clang. I froze. No one was inside. The friars had already gone to their quarters. The bell rang again, once, then stopped. I told myself it was the wind, nothing more. Yet as I looked out across the plaza, I saw a figure moving near the market, stumbling, jerking, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. Then came a scream, high and thin, cutting through the night. I gripped my rifle and started running. That was the moment Ta'al stopped feeling like home. I sprinted across the plaza, boots pounding against the cobblestones, the church bell still echoing in my head. The mist hung low, swallowing the alleys and lanterns. A small crowd had gathered around a woman kneeling beside a man. His face was twisted, eyes rolling white, mouth foaming as he convulsed on the ground. The woman clutched him, crying for help. When I pushed through, she looked up. Blood streaked across her cheeks. "Back away!" I ordered. She didn't move. The man's body jerked once, then went still. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then his eyes snapped open. He lunged. The woman screamed as his teeth tore into her neck. I fired without thinking. The crack of the rifle shattered the night. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, but he didn't fall. He turned toward me, mouth dripping red, stumbling forward like his bones were moving without his will. I fired again. This time the shot struck his chest, but he only staggered, jerking as if the bullet barely slowed him. He straightened again, dragging himself forward with a guttural snarl. I aimed higher. The next bullet hit his head. Only then did he fall still. The woman lay beside him, gasping. Blood poured from her wound, bubbling with each breath. People scattered in all directions, some praying, some running for the church. Others simply froze. Teniente Morales arrived moments later with 2 soldiers, his face twisted in disgust. "What happened here?" I pointed to the bodies. He turned violent, bitter. I had to shoot. He waved me off. "They're peasants, probably drunk." He motioned to the others. "Dispose of them. Burn the bodies at dawn." "But sir, that's an order." He stormed off toward the church. I stood there, rifle trembling in my hands, watching the woman's chest rise and fall, slower each time until it stopped. I turned to leave. Then I heard a sound, a wet gasp. She sat up. The townsfolk screamed and scattered again. Her head lolled to one side, eyes dull and empty. Blood ran from her mouth in a thin line. She staggered to her feet, swaying. I raised my rifle, but my arms wouldn't move. One of the soldiers rushed forward with a bayonet, shouting. She turned toward him, mouth opening in a sound that wasn't human. When she lunged, her teeth clamped down on his face. He screamed, a raw animal noise. I fired again, this time at her head. She dropped instantly, motionless in the dirt. The plaza was chaos. People ran for their homes, locking doors, shouting prayers. The teniente drew his sword, slashing the air, yelling for order. But even he looked afraid. By dawn, 3 more were bitten, each turning within moments, fast as wildfire. The friars called for a mass at sunrise. The church was full, not of faith, but of fear. I stood near the doors, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the crowd. The teniente sat near the altar again, pale and sweating. The head friar, Padre Esteban, raised his hands. "This is a test," he declared. "The Lord purges the unfaithful. We must not yield to panic." As if on cue, a scream rose from the back pews. A man was thrashing, clawing at his own skin. His wife tried to hold him down, but he bit her hand clean through. The pews overturned. People rushed for the exits. I shouted for them to move aside, but it was useless. In seconds, the church became a cage. Bodies pushing, falling, screaming. The teniente drew his pistol and fired into the ceiling. "Silence!" he roared. But no one listened. The infected man stood, eyes vacant, mouth dripping. He lunged toward the altar. Padre Esteban didn't move in time. The 2 of them fell together, the priest's screams muffled beneath the man's gnashing teeth. I ran forward, grabbed a torch from the wall, and swung it. The flame caught the man's hair, then his clothes. He staggered backward, thrashing, and the fire spread to the drapes behind the altar. The teniente cursed. "Get everyone out!" Smoke filled the air. People spilled from the doors, some on fire, some bleeding. By the time the last of the survivors stumbled into the plaza, the church doors had collapsed inward. The screams inside faded beneath the roar of fire. I dropped to my knees, coughing. The teniente stood beside me, face blackened with soot. His voice was low, shaking. "See to the wounded," Morales said, gripping my shoulder through the smoke. "Get whoever's still breathing out of here. I'll look for the surviving friars. We'll regroup at the convent." He turned before I could answer, disappearing into the haze with the last of his men. The plaza burned around us. Screams, gunfire, and the sound of collapsing beams. I started toward the fallen, the heat pressing against my face, the smell of blood thick in the air. Smoke still hung over the town under a pale morning sky. The church was a black shell against the pale sky, its bell tower cracked and silent. Ash drifted through the air like falling snow. I walked the plaza with my rifle ready, stepping over bodies. Some were burned, others torn apart. I looked for movement, not from the living, but from what refused to die. A soldier called out from behind the fountain. "Senor, over here!" There's two of them, their uniforms stained and faces hollow. Between them lay a wounded man, one of the townsfolk, bitten on the shoulder. He was shaking, whispering prayers. "We can help him," one soldier said. I started to answer, but the man's eyes rolled white. He convulsed once, then lunged upward with a snarl. His teeth sank into the soldier's throat before I could shout a warning. The other froze in horror. I fired. The bullet struck clean through the skull. Both bodies fell together, motionless. The surviving soldier stared at me, trembling. "What are they?" I didn't know what to tell him. "Keep your distance." Headshots only. We left the plaza and moved toward the barracks. The streets were littered with overturned carts, baskets of spilled fruit, and bodies in the gutters. Dogs barked from rooftops, crazed by the scent of blood. When we reached the gate, we found it hanging open. Inside, the courtyard was empty except for a trail of footprints leading to the stables. We followed them cautiously. In the shadows, 3 townspeople huddled together, a woman, an old man, and a boy no older than 10. The woman raised her hands. "Please, don't shoot." "They're clean," the soldier whispered. I nodded. "Stay close. We're heading to the convent. Stone walls. Better defense." The boy clung to the woman's skirt. "Are the friars still alive?" I didn't answer. We crossed the main road, keeping to the narrow alleys where the smoke was thick. From the direction of the church came distant screams. Short, sharp, and human no longer. Every corner felt like a trap. At one intersection, a figure burst from a doorway and ran at us, fast and crooked. I raised the rifle and fired. The shot went wide, catching its shoulder. It barely slowed. I adjusted and fired again, this time through the head. The body dropped mid-stride. The woman gasped. "Dios mío," the old man muttered. "They don't feel pain. They don't die right." We pressed on. The convent loomed ahead, its gate chained shut. The teniente's voice called from inside. "Who's there?" "It's me," I said. "We have survivors." The gate creaked open. Morales stood behind it, pistol drawn, eyes red from smoke. 2 soldiers guarded the door. "You brought civilians," he said coldly. "They're unbitten," I replied. He looked them over, then back at me. "We can't save everyone. Supplies are low. Ammunition, lower." The woman stepped forward. "Please, my son." "Quiet," he snapped. Something in me broke a little at that word. I'd heard it too many times from men like him. "We'll stay," I said. "We'll help guard the gate." He hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. But if anyone shows signs, anyone, you shoot." Night came again before we could rest. We barricaded the entrance with furniture and crates. The boy fell asleep beside his mother, clutching a rosary. I sat near the doorway, rifle across my knees. Outside, the moans echoed through the streets, hundreds of voices rising and falling like a sick wind. The surviving soldier whispered, "How long can we hold?" I looked toward the plaza, where the smoke still glowed faintly orange. "Until the bullets run out," I said. By morning, the air inside the convent had turned sour. Sweat, smoke, and fear. The wounded groaned in the corners, and the small courtyard smelled of blood. We had barricaded every door with pews and crates, but the moans outside still seeped through the cracks. Teniente Morales stood by the stairwell, speaking quietly with another Spaniard, one of the friars who had survived the fire. The friar's hands trembled as he held a pistol too heavy for him. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught enough to understand. "The Indios will turn soon," the friar whispered. "Their blood is weaker. The sickness chooses them first." Morales nodded. "Then we separate them. Only Spaniards and mestizos stay inside the chapel. The rest will guard the walls." The words burned like hot iron. The woman I had saved, her name was Isabella, clutched her boy close. The old man beside her spat on the floor. "Guard the walls? They mean to throw us out." I looked at the teniente. "These people have done nothing. They're clean." He turned, cold as stone. "I will not argue. You forget your place, soldado. They obey, or they leave." The other soldiers looked at me, uncertain. One of them, a young mestizo corporal, lowered his voice. "Sir, we're low on food. Maybe—" "Enough," Morales snapped. "The crown comes first. Not the rabble." He walked off, leaving the friar to oversee the sorting. The friar moved through the room, pointing out who could stay. Pale skin, fine clothes, foreign faces. They were spared. Everyone else was told to gather by the outer gate. When he reached Isabella, he frowned. "The child is brown like his mother." "They go." She held her boy tighter. "Please, my husband was a clerk for the church. We're not—" The friar turned away. "Out!" I gripped my rifle until my knuckles ached. The old man looked at me, eyes pleading. "You wear their uniform! Will you let them do this?" I said nothing. By midday, half the convent stood outside the walls. Women, children, and a few Indio soldiers like myself. Morales watched from the upper balcony, expression blank. The friar read a prayer over them, as if it were a burial rite. Then the first scream came. From the western gate, one of the infected slammed into the barricade, shrieking. More followed, fast and wild. We fired through the gaps, heads bursting like fruit. The civilians outside panicked, clawing at the doors, begging to be let back in. "Hold your ground," Morales shouted. "Do not open that gate!" The boy was crying. His mother tried to cover his mouth, whispering for him to be quiet. The old man tripped and fell. The infected were on him in seconds. I swung my rifle and fired, one after another, each shot finding its mark. But there were too many. Isabella turned to me, eyes wide. "Help us!" I grabbed her arm. "This way!" I pulled them toward a side passage near the stables, a narrow corridor with a rusted door. We pushed through as the gate behind us buckled. The screams of those left outside filled the air. Inside the stables, I barred the door with a beam. The boy was shaking, his face buried against his mother's chest. She tried to steady her breath. "You should have let us die," she said softly. "You'll be punished for this." "Maybe," I answered. Gunfire echoed from the main courtyard. The infected had breached the outer walls. Through a crack in the door, I saw soldiers retreating, Spaniards first, leaving Indios to fight and fall behind them. One of the infected crashed against the stable door. The wood shuddered, but held. I reloaded, hands trembling, listening to the chaos outside. Then came the teniente's voice, shouting orders. "Seal the chapel!" No one else inside. The old friar screamed that the infected were climbing the bell tower. The gunfire grew frantic, then stopped. Silence followed. Heavy, terrible silence. Isabella's boy whispered, "Are they gone?" I couldn't answer. I could still hear movement beyond the wall. Soft steps, dragging feet. We waited until the noise outside faded before moving. The boy clung to his mother's skirt, silent now, eyes wide from fear. Smoke seeped through the cracks in the stable walls, thick and bitter. I unbarred the door and peered into the courtyard. The convent was gone, a ruin of shattered stone and blood. Corpses lay scattered like broken idols, some still twitching. The air reeked of ash and decay. "Stay close," I whispered. We crept through the yard, stepping over fallen rifles and burned cloth. A Spaniard lay half buried under debris, his hand still gripping a pistol. The insignia on his sleeve marked him as one of Morales' men. I pried the pistol from his fingers and handed it to Isabella. "Take it," I said. "If one of them grabs you, aim for the head." She nodded, lips trembling. At the far end of the courtyard, the chapel doors were half open. From inside came the echo of slow footsteps, uneven, dragging. I raised my rifle, motioning for the others to stay behind me. A figure stumbled out of the smoke. It was Morales. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with blood. He held his sword in one hand and a lantern in the other. "Soldado," he rasped, spotting me. "Help me. They're inside the walls." I stepped closer, weapon raised. "Are you bitten?" "No," he said quickly. The others turned. The friar, he let them in. His voice broke into a cough. "We need to regroup. There's an ammunition cart near the gate. Bring your people." He called us your people, the way others say your animals. I didn't answer. We followed him through a passage lined with bodies. Some wore habits, some the blue of the Guardia Civil. Every face told the same story. Those who hesitated had died. At the gate, a small barricade of crates and sandbags blocked the path. A couple of Spanish and Indio soldiers crouched behind it, firing into the street. The infected came in waves, slamming into the wall, climbing over the dead. Their eyes gleamed in the torchlight, mouths open in endless hunger. "Keep shooting!" Morales shouted. I took position beside one of the soldiers and aimed for the head of the nearest attacker. The shot cracked, skull bursting open. Another came from the left, fast. I hit the shoulder first, missed, then adjusted and fired again. It dropped only after the second shot. "Reload faster," Morales barked. "Calla Indio y dispara." I bit back the urge to answer. The man beside me was reloading with shaking hands. He couldn't have been older than 17. His next shot went wide. A creature leapt over the barricade and sank its teeth into him before I could turn. Blood sprayed across my face. I shoved the barrel of my rifle against the infected's temple and pulled the trigger. Both bodies collapsed together. The gate shuddered as more slammed into it. The hinges began to bend. Morales shouted for the Spaniards to fall back toward the inner court. "Por la corona!" he yelled. None of the Indio soldiers followed. We fought until the last of our cartridges were spent. Then the line broke. The infected poured through the gate like a tide. I grabbed Isabella and the boy and ran. The old man fell behind us, his breath ragged. I turned to pull him up. Teeth flashed in the smoke. His scream followed us down the corridor. We burst out into the open street. The town was unrecognizable. Fire as everywhere. Roofs collapsing. The sky red with sparks. Screams came from every direction. We ran toward the lake. My rifle was nearly empty. Only one round left. The boy stumbled. I lifted him and kept moving. At the plaza, the fountain still trickled, its water black with ash. Dozens of infected staggered through the square. Among them, I saw faces I knew. Townsfolk, soldiers, even the friar from earlier. His robes were torn, his eyes glassy. He moved faster than the rest, mouth twisting into a grin. "Run," I whispered. We cut through the alley behind the market. The smell of death clung to everything. Isabella's pistol clicked empty. She threw it aside, gasping for breath. At the alley's end, a group of survivors waved from a cart surrounded by crates. Mestizos and Spaniards, Morales among them. He was bleeding but alive, shouting orders. "Get in!" he yelled. "We're pulling back to the docks." I looked at him, then at Isabella and her boy. There was no room left in the cart. The Spaniards pushed back the hands reaching for help. Morales glared at me. "Only my men," he said. "You understand." The cart lurched away, leaving us behind. The infected rounded the corner, dozens of them. I turned to Isabella. "Go. Take the boy. Follow the smoke to the water." She shook her head. "You'll die." "Maybe," I said, "but not yet." I stepped into the street, lifted my rifle, and fired my last shot. The nearest creature's head snapped back, body crumpling. I swung the rifle like a club at the next one, feeling bone crack under the stock. Isabella ran, dragging her son toward the shore. I didn't look back. My arms felt heavy, my breath ragged. Maybe this was where it ended, buried beneath the town I once swore to protect. I closed my eyes and waited for the teeth. Then I saw it. A warehouse nearby, its wooden frame already burning, walls cracking under the heat. The roof sagged, ready to fall. I turned toward it without thinking, forcing my body to move. The horde rushed after me, shrieking. Their footsteps thundered behind me as I stumbled through the doorway, the air inside a furnace. Flames climbed the walls, licking the beams above. I ran through the smoke, every breath burning my throat. The back wall split open from the heat, revealing a way through. I dove just as the building groaned and came down behind me in a roar of fire and collapsing timber. The impact shook the ground, a wall of flame and debris crashing down on the horde. Their screams turned to crackling ash. I lay face down in the dirt, coughing, my lungs filling with smoke. The world spun, the air too thick to breathe. I tried to stand, but my legs gave out. The last thing I saw was the sky glowing red through the smoke, like dawn breaking too soon. Then everything went dark. The first light of dawn crept through the smoke, gray and weak. I woke among the dead, my body half buried under ash and splintered wood. The air was thick with rot and the soft crackle of dying fires. My ears rang. My rifle was gone. The last thing I remembered was the rush of bodies closing in. I didn't know where I was. The town, the convent, the market. It all looked the same now. Just bones and ashes piled together. Dozens of corpses sprawled, soldiers and townsfolk alike, some still twitching in the morning light. One stirred nearby, its eyes white and empty. I grabbed a bayonet from the ground and drove it through the skull. The sound was soft, final. I found a pistol on a fallen Spaniard and checked the cylinder. 2 bullets left. I took his belt of cartridges and slipped it over my shoulder, though most were empty shells. Then I began walking. The streets were unrecognizable, houses burned to their frames, bodies piled against doors and walls. A horse dragged itself by its forelegs, its rider long dead. The flag of Spain, torn and blackened, hung limply from a balcony. Everywhere I looked, there were signs of flight, broken crates, footprints in soot, trails of blood leading downhill. Toward the water. The closer I came to the lake, the quieter it grew. The infected had wandered off, following noise or motion elsewhere. Only the wind moved, carrying the stench of smoke and rot. At the edge of town, I saw the first dock. Boats half sunk, ropes still tied, barrels rolling in the shallows. And near them, 2 figures. They were standing side by side, faces turned toward the water. Isabella and her son. Their skin was pale, eyes clouded, clothes torn. The boy's hands hung limp, his small body swaying slightly, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. I froze. The pistol shook in my hand. For a moment I wanted to call their names, but the sound died in my throat. They turned at once, sensing me, their mouths opening in that same low, broken moan I had heard too many times. They stumbled forward. I stepped back, my chest tight. "I'm sorry," I whispered. 2 shots, 1 for each. The water rippled with the echo. The noise carried farther than I thought. From the far end of the dock, 2 more shapes emerged, fast, snarling, their movements sharp and jerky. I caught the first one mid-charge, driving the bayonet through its eye. The second lunged. I swung the pistol's butt into its jaw, sending it tumbling into the water. It clawed back up the edge, teeth snapping. I kicked it down again and stabbed until it stopped moving. When it was done, I fell to my knees. The pistol slipped from my hand. The sky above was pale and empty, the kind that makes everything look washed out, unreal. I stayed there until the smoke shifted, revealing the far side of the docks. Cart tracks, heavy boot prints, and spent shells marked a trail leading east, toward the larger pier. Morales had gone that way. I stood, gripping the bayonet until my knuckles turned white. I remembered his face, the arrogance, the calm indifference as he ordered the gates sealed, as he decided who lived and who did. He had left her, left all of us. I picked up another pistol from one of the bodies and checked the last cartridge in the cylinder. My reflection looked back at me in the water, blood-smeared, eyes hollow, not quite the man who had marched under his orders 2 days ago. I whispered to the reflection, "Por mi pueblo," for my people. Then I started toward the pier. The path wound through the ruins of the lower town, past a sugar warehouse still burning, past a dead priest lying in the road. Every few steps, I heard movement in the distance, the slow drag of the infected, following sound, following life. But I didn't hide anymore. Each step felt heavier, but clearer too. I wasn't walking to survive. I was walking to finish it. By the time I reached the ridge overlooking the main dock, the sun had risen above the lake. Through the smoke, I saw them, a cluster of boats, Morales and his men loading crates, shouting orders. A group of Indio soldiers stood apart, begging for space. My hands clenched around the pistol. The wind carried Morales' voice faintly across the water, barking commands, promising salvation for the few. I started down the slope, slow and steady. the bayonet glinting in the morning light. Smoke still curled above the lake when I reached the pier. The air was heavy with the stink of gunpowder and rot. From behind the ruins of a warehouse, I saw them, Morales and what remained of his command, loading crates of ammunition and food onto 2 small boats. The Spaniards barked orders, pushing away the Indio soldiers who begged to come aboard. "Back! Only officers!" one shouted, striking a man with the butt of his rifle. The others stood ankle-deep in the shallows, hollow-eyed, their faces streaked with ash and blood. They had fought, bled, and buried their families. Now they were told they were unworthy of salvation. Morales stood on the dock, his arm bound in a bloody sling, shouting over the chaos. "Apúrense! We leave now. The infected are coming." He didn't look like a man escaping death. He looked like a man protecting his privilege. I stepped out from the shadows, bayonet in hand, pistol at my hip. "Leaving without saying goodbye, Teniente?" Morales turned. For a heartbeat, confusion crossed his face, then contempt. "You made it?" he said, voice dripping with mockery. "Bravo. But as you can see, there's no room for you here." "I saw Isabella," I said, "and her boy, at the water's edge." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "You could have saved them, but you didn't. Not because there wasn't room, but because they weren't like you. Because their skin wasn't pale enough to deserve mercy." Morales straightened, voice cold. "They were already dead. You think I'd risk the Crown's officers for peasants? Order keeps the world alive. Mercy kills it." "Then maybe the world deserves to die," I said. He raised his chin. "Soldiers! Shoot him!" 2 Spaniards lifted their rifles. The Indio troops nearby froze, caught between fear and something older, heavier. I didn't flinch. "Go ahead," I said. "Pull the trigger. Do it for the same empire that burned our church and left your children outside its walls. Do it for the men who call you dogs and send you to die for their god." The Spaniards hesitated. The Indios lowered their rifles first. One of them muttered, "He's right." Morales' voice cracked. "Traitors, you swore to the Crown." "The Crown?" I shouted. "Where is it now?" "Hiding on those boats while we choke on smoke. The only oath worth taking is to each other, to the land they took, and the blood they spilled." The pier fell silent except for the creak of the boats and the distant moans rising from the burning town. Then an Indio corporal stepped forward. His hands shook, but his aim was steady. "No more, Teniente." Morales' eyes widened. "You dare?" The corporal fired. The bullet tore through Morales' shoulder, spinning him backward. Chaos erupted. The Spaniards turned their guns on the Indios, shouting curses. Muzzle flashes lit the pier like lightning. I ducked behind a crate, fired my last bullet into a Spaniard's throat, then lunged with the bayonet. The pier became a slaughterhouse. Indios charged with rifles and knives, screaming with rage that had waited generations. Morales shouted orders. No one obeyed. He drew his sword, slashing wildly until another bullet ripped through his thigh. The noise carried across the water. From the town, new screams answered. The infected, drawn by the gunfire. I staggered toward Morales through the smoke. He was crawling toward the nearest boat, dragging his leg, leaving a smear of blood behind him. He looked up at me, panting. "You think this changes anything?" he rasped. "You kill me, and another officer will take my place. Another crown, another whip. You were born to serve, Indio. It's all you've ever been good for." I stepped closer, the bayonet trembling in my hand. "Serve?" I said. "We built your walls. We tilled your fields. We bled under your flags while you called it faith. You fed on us until there was nothing left. and still, you called it order. He tried to reach for his pistol, but the blade drove through his heart. His body jerked once, then fell still. Around us, the dock burned. One of the boats had overturned, flames licking at its hull. The other drifted free, half loaded, ropes snapping in the heat. The remaining Indio soldiers shouted, some wounded, some already falling as the infected poured from the street. Dozens of them, faces blackened with soot. "Fall back!" someone screamed. "To the boats!" I looked at Morales' corpse one last time, then pried his pistol from his belt. Still loaded. 6 rounds. The first infected hit the pier, shrieking. I fired. Clean headshot. Then another. The Indios fought beside me, rifles cracking, blades flashing. The pier shook beneath the weight of bodies and fire. One of the soldiers shouted, "The ropes are loose!" "Then go!" I yelled. "Go before they reach the water!" He hesitated. "What about you?" I reloaded, cocked the hammer. "I'll hold the dock." He nodded once, then jumped aboard as the boat drifted away through the mist. The infected swarmed the crates, clawing over the dead. I shot until the pistol clicked empty, then swung the bayonet in wide, desperate arcs. One fell, then another. The last one knocked me to the ground, snapping its jaws inches from my throat. I jammed the blade upward, straight through its jaw and skull. When it went limp, I pushed it aside and rolled onto my back. The dock was collapsing, half of it swallowed by fire, the rest slick with blood. The boat of survivors drifted toward the open water, their oars vanishing into the haze. I sat up, trembling, the sunrise bleeding red across the freshwater lake. In the distance, the bell tower of Ta'al still stood, cracked, blackened, defiant. Somewhere in that hollow wind, I thought I heard it toll again. One last time. But it wasn't a warning anymore. It was a promise. Ash floated on the surface like gray petals, carried by the slow ripple of the wind. The dock behind me was gone, only a blackened skeleton now, jutting into the water. Smoke rose from the ruins of Ta'al, twisting skyward until it vanished into the pale morning. My body ached. Dried blood caked my hands. The pistol lay beside me, its barrel warped from heat. For the first time since it began, there was silence. No bells, no orders, no prayers. I walked to the edge of the pier and looked across the water. One of the boats had made it far from shore, a dark speck drifting into the mist. I could almost hear their oars, slow and uneven, fading farther with each stroke. Maybe some of them lived. Maybe the infection reached them before the sun did. I no longer knew which I wanted to believe. The reflection in the water looked back at me, hollow-eyed, streaked with soot, the same man who had once saluted the flag, now stripped of everything it stood for. I thought of Morales, his final words, "You were born to serve." Maybe I was, but not anymore. I turned toward the town. The wind carried the faint smell of wet stone and burned flesh. Houses stood like open graves, their roofs collapsed, their walls crawling with smoke. The bell tower still rose above it all, cracked but standing, its shadow long over the plaza. I started walking, not toward escape, but home, or what was left of it. The streets were littered with the dead, their faces half buried in ash. Every few steps, a corpse twitched, but none rose. Whatever curse had gripped them seemed spent. When I reached the plaza, I stopped beneath the tower. The bell lay cracked among the rubble, its rope burned away. I touched the bronze rim. It was cold despite the fire that had once wrapped it. Then I heard voices. Low, human. Instinct pulled the pistol from my belt, though it was empty. From between two ruined houses, figures emerged. Half a dozen men in torn clothes and makeshift bandages, rifles slung over their shoulders. Their faces were smoke-streaked, eyes hollow from nights without sleep. The man in front wore no uniform, only a red scarf around his neck. His gaze was sharp despite the exhaustion. "We thought no one was left," he said. His Tagalog carried the tone of Manila. "I could say the same," I answered. "Where did you come from?" "Manila," he said. "We fled when the sickness reached the walled city." The Spaniards sealed the gates. We broke through and headed south, hoping Batangas was still standing. He stepped closer, the light catching his face, gaunt, scarred, but calm. "I'm Andres," he said quietly. "Andres Bonifacio." I glanced at the others behind him. One carried a wounded boy. Another kept guard with a blood-stained bolo. They looked as ruined as I felt. Survivors, not saviors. He looked past me to the bell tower. "The lowlands are lost," he said. "Too many dead, too much smoke. We're heading for the mountains. Rivers still run there, and the sickness spreads slower." He extended his hand. "If you can still walk, come with us." I looked once more at the tower, the cracked bell, the ashes of faith and order. Then I shook his hand. His grip was rough, warm, alive. As we turned toward the hills, the wind shifted through the ruins. From somewhere in the distance came the sound of gunfire, faint, scattered, then gone.